There's something unsettling about a BookTube video that doesn't have a bookshelf in the background, but there is also something unsettling about a 7-foot IKEA Billy bookcase. What I'm saying is I hope you've all anchored your bookshelves to the wall. Hello, my name is Danny. I'm brand new to posting on YouTube, so I'm recording this video to introduce myself to you and introduce myself to video editing. BookTube has this cute tag for people like me called the BookTube newbie tag, but I was looking at the questions and I don't really want to do it as written, so I'm just going to create my own questions and experiment with how many unwritten rules of BookTube I can flout in my first video. I do have a poster behind me of a stag in a pond with some books. That is meant to convey, for the purposes of this video, that I am in fact literate. But I don't own a lot of books actually, and I swear to God, I can read, I do read. Look. But I use my public library a lot. Support your public library. I've just moved too many times in the past few years. I have a fraught relationship with stuff, okay? So I'm not in a book buying period of my life. I grew up reading a lot. I came from a family of readers. My dad sure had a bookshelf or two, including a really large one filled out completely with sci-fi paperbacks. Some formative childhood reads for me were A Series of Unfortunate Events. That series is a postmodern masterpiece. The metafiction, the unreliable narration, the irony shaped me forever, stunning. The Del Toro Quest series was another one that comes to mind. I actually don't remember a lot of the details, but I remember it had all of these riddles and visual puzzles, and it was just a very fun children's fantasy series. As I got a little bit older, obviously I'm of the age where Harry Potter was very popular and I wasn't immune. But the real joy of reading Harry Potter was the community around it. Reading it deeply and closely and talking to people online about it is exactly why I like BookTube now. Because reading is a private act most of the time, and even if you have other readers in your life, it's not necessarily the case that your reading tastes and schedules are in sync. So having access to a broad online community is a wonderful thing. And to jump ahead, when I was in college, I majored in linguistics and minored in English with a focus on the history of the English language. I read Beowulf in the original Old English. I read some Chaucer, some Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, some Shakespeare. To be honest, that was over 10 years ago now, and I remember very little of most of those reads, but it shaped my tastes and expanded my horizons to read things that were quite challenging or lacking the modern idea of a narrative structure. After I graduated college, I had a book Tumblr, a bookler, if you will, for a couple of years, so I do have some history blogging about books. But in 2017, I started a PhD program in linguistics and my fiction reading fell off a cliff. So from 2017 to 2023, when I was in that PhD program, I read maybe one book for pleasure a year. And last year, I started a job outside of academia and made up for all of that last time by reading 80 books. So here we are today. I like to read diversely, meaning a mixture of genres, a mixture of new releases and classics and backlist books. Throw in some poetry, throw in some nonfiction. That said, my comfort zone, my favorites are usually literary fiction or adventurous fantasy or historical fiction. The genres I tend to read less are romance, mystery, and horror, and I still do try to pick up those books because they're fun. They're just not what I tend to prioritize. So now I'm going to transition to give 3 of my favorite reads from last year in no particular order, just to give a sense of what I enjoy reading and what stands out to me when I read books. So first up is The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. And I really loved this because of the way it played with structure and hidden information. This is a story within a story within a story. you have an 80-year-old woman named Iris reflecting on her life and the life of her sister Laura, who died in 1945, presumably by driving herself off of a bridge intentionally. A couple years after Laura's death, Iris published a book on Laura's behalf after going through the papers that Laura left behind. We also get to read that book written by Laura called The Blind Assassin. In The Blind Assassin, a nameless man and a nameless woman are meeting illicitly, and the man is a writer of lowbrow, pulpy sci-fi and tells her stories that he's writing about the planet Zircon, which features blind assassins. I just thought the narrative structure in this book was so clever, and I loved the themes about secrets and families and social class. Up second, one of the big unintentional themes of my reading last year was nation building, the ideologies and power dynamics that work to form a national identity. And The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman was one of the surprising standouts for this theme. This is an Arthurian legend retelling, though the primary action of the book takes place after the death of King Arthur, following the adventures of the few lousy knights of the Round Table that remain and are seeking a direction, a miracle, to lead them forward. The knights, who are mostly not the major players in Arthurian lore, are given updated, fleshed out backstories, which I've really enjoyed. You have Sir Bedivere, who is the one-handed warrior who throws Excalibur to the Lady of the Lake after Arthur's death. And in this retelling, he was in love with Arthur. You have Sir Palamedes the Saracen, and he's a Muslim knight from the Middle East that is really fleshed out in this book. You have Sir Scipio, who was a Roman legionnaire before he joins the Round Table. And the whole novel takes a lens of cultural contact and post-colonialism to Arthurian legend. In this time period, and emphasized in this book, you have native British culture coexisting with imported Roman culture and the impending invasions of the Anglo-Saxons who King Arthur was fighting against. It's a story of a people and a nation in flux in a power vacuum, and I thought this was such a thoughtful contemporary addition to the Arthurian canon. Finally, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin was another one of my favorites last year. I was so happy to get to Le Guin finally. My cat wanted to say hi. Also in the themes of nation building, this features an anarchist society on the resource-scarce planet of Anaris. This society was basically permitted to exist and branch off from the nearby resource-rich planet of Eurus several centuries before the book happens as a resolution to a rebellion, some kind of civil war. And so the planets orbit each other, but people do not visit between these planets. They don't migrate between these planets before our main character, Shevik, decides to leave the anarchist society on Anaris in order to pursue his advanced physics research on Eurus. The story is again told in a pretty interesting way with this rotating timeline where chapters portraying his time in capitalist Eurus are interleaved with chapters about him growing up on anarchist Anaris until it catches up to the present. I love this book because it was thoughtful about political power and intrigue, and also because line for line it was beautifully written. Le Guin has a real economy of language that I just love to sit in. So my favorite books look like a lot of dense, serious works, but I also read fun, light stuff for the record. Some lighter reads that I enjoyed last year were Frederica by Georgette Heyer, which is a funny Regency romance for fans of Bridgerton Season 2. I'm also working my way through the Discworld series, which is my idea of a cozy fantasy comfort read. I read Equal Rights, Sorcery, and Reaper Man last year and looking to keep plowing through those. And that's me. That's where I'm starting. I'm excited to talk more about books here and interact with the BookTube community as a creator. If you're watching, let me know your thoughts. Let me know if anything resonated, and I hope to see you next week for a January reading wrap-up.